paper stock, cover lines, and hex color codes. Across every concern, we care about literature and are dedicated to our dual mission of promoting the most exciting writers of the day and supporting ambitious, inquisitive readers the world over. Readers and writers, they're not exactly opposite, but certainly a complementary pair, and I'm glad we're able to bring you together tonight. I know that many of us are thinking about Breonna Taylor this evening, about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and what will happen in November. It is a welcome relief and a small portion of joy to know that while so much is in flux, there is still literature, and it is within our reach to celebrate that writing, to embrace existing traditions, and to create new ones. In the before times, I'd greet readers at our lunch parties from atop the pool table. Tonight, I'm in my living room. Felt underfoot or not, it's a pleasure to salute the team effort, to thank our contributors, and to celebrate together. I'm glad this evening can include so many of you as our signal wends its way through the World Wide Web and around the globe. A few housekeeping details. To keep things running on the clock, whichever time zone you're in, we've suspended audience comments and we won't have time for audience questions, though I will have a quick Q&A with each contributor. My colleague Julia will be sharing links to the readings and to further information about the contributors throughout the program, so please keep an eye on the chat. While I'm mentioning colleagues, thank you to Craig for manning the control panel this evening, and to Vijay, Hassan, Lauren, Stricken Williams, Chris and Eleanor, and everyone else at TPR HQ for their work on the issue and the site. Now, on with the show. To start, we'll hear about 10 minutes from Elegosa Osunde's story, Good Boy. Elegosa is a writer and multidisciplinary artist. She's the author of Vagabonds, which will be published by Riverhead next year. Her writing has appeared on Longreads and Catapult and in the Berlin Quarterly, and her visual art has appeared in Vogue, the New York Times, and Paper Magazine. She's a 2019 Lambda Literary Fellow and a 2020 MacDowell Colony Fellow. Speaking of reaching around the globe, Elegosa is joining us tonight from Nigeria, so she gets the prize for staying up the latest. Thank you for being a night owl with us.
Thank you, Emily, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I will be reading 2 excerpts from my story, Good Boy. Enjoy. I've always had a problem with introductions. To me, they don't matter. It's either you know me or you don't. You get? If you don't, the main thing you need to know is that I'm a hustler through and through. I'm that guy that gets shit done, simple. Kick me out of the house at 15. A barged in on secret behind me, a heartbreak falling into my shin as I walk, and watch me grow some real useful muscles. Watch me learn how to play all the necessary games, good and ungood. Watch me learn how to notice red eyes, how to figure out when to squat and bite the road shoulder. Watch me learn why a good knife, and not just any kind of good, but the moral-less kind, the father-like kind, is necessary when you're sleeping under a bridge. Just a week after that, watch me swear on my own destiny and insist to the God who made me that I'm bigger than that lesson now. Then watch my Ori align. Watch me walk from that cursed bridge a free man and learn how to really make money between age damaged and age 22. Watch me pay the streets what I owe in blood and notes, upfront, no installments. Watch me never lack where to sleep again. Second thing to know about me, I know how to make the crucial handshakes. Third thing, I know they make the same mistake twice. Almost evict me from my place in Surulere at age X, and watch rage stab me forward. Watch how in 3 weeks, I treat my own fuck up with not just a room, but an apartment 4 times as big in Bagada. The how is irrelevant. Fourth thing, I'm serious about being alive. Because of this, there is nothing I can't survive. Anybody who knows me knows that. The rest agrees. It is my God-given right to be here. This life, me, I must chop am, and it must be on my own terms. What makes all of this worth it otherwise? Nothing. Someone I know joked just 2 days ago, Seth, that even if I end up in hell at the end of the day, I won't stop kicking. I won't stop reaching for something. I will insist on my space. In reality, I'm not the kind of guy who ends up in a place like that because, fifth thing, I'm not the kind of guy who believes in hell or in a God who imagines a lake of fire. I just can't see it. You have a mind that's wider than the sky, and that is what you use it to picture. To me, that sounds too petty, too human, too undivine to be real. People sell all kinds of gods all the time. I know the one that moves me, and it's not the one I was raised on. To me, you can't say you're love, choose to roast people for eternity, and then pretend it breaks your heart. Pick a side. Anyhow, the guy said the hell thing to make a point, and it's true. Luck finds my head. Business competes with my blood on who keeps me best, and either might fail depending on the day. So now, I always wonder, what do people want to use my name for? It won't buy you anything. Name drop me, and they'll still redirect you to me. In that sense, it's irrelevant to know. I answer a first name only, and it's for the people I know. But my story, now that many people can do a whole lot with. That's the first excerpt. And then the second excerpt is the end of the story. So just give me a second while I scroll. Right, okay. Anyway, you want to know what I said when I was... It's raining, so if you can hear that, that's what's happening.
Was that thunder? Wow.
Yes.
All right. Anyway, want to know.
Anyway, you want to know what I said when I was at work one day and got a call to come back home because my father was sick after years of not hearing from him? I said yes. And I stayed there for 2 months. I took care of him and paid all the hospital bills. When he got well enough to say hello to me, my father followed the greeting with a request. "You're doing well for yourself," he said, "and my life is going. There's only one more thing remaining. Won't you let me meet the woman you will marry? Won't you let me see you whole?" Now, the difference between Mara's story and my own is that my father looked at me, even knowing I owed him nothing, and he still asked that of me. I held his hand, my hand capsizing slowly, and said, "Yes, sir, you will see me whole." "When?" he asked. "Tomorrow, just here," I said. For the anxiety that request dragged out of me, I planned to walk out of there and never return. Still, I said, "If you are ready, then me, I'm ready, tomorrow." "Good," he said, and closed his eyes. He believed he needed to bless my heart for love to work for me. Imagine that. A man I lived without for over a decade. A man who didn't know if I still had a beating heart, wanted to meet the person I would love enough to start a life with. I went home and cried on Kay's shoulder. It was both of us who pooled resources together to do what we could for my dad. For months, Kay had been digging his hand into his pocket for the man who almost made us impossible, the man who would hate him on sight. It was somewhere in that breakdown that I changed my mind. The next day, I took Kay to my father's bedside. My person stood beside me, watching us. "Where is she?" my father asked, ignoring the obvious. I stared back my response, no words, just eye to eye, man to man. I saw it click. He swallowed and then opened his mouth to talk. Nothing came out. I repeated myself with a closed mouth, hands in my pockets, staring him down. I felt Kay turn to stone in fear. The money we had spent bullied my father in front of me, its knuckles ready for his teeth. "Do you understand?" the money asked him. My father shrank, and I almost pitied him. But I reached for Kay's hand, and feeling how much it had been sweating, I lifted his hand to my mouth and pressed my lips to it before holding his palm to my chest. "Are you sure you understand, Dad?" I asked. By then, my voice was hot iron. No one, I decided there and then, is allowed to kill me twice. Using my child voice, he said, "Yes, sir." And using his dad voice, I said, "Good boy. Thank you."
Thank you, Alagosa, for that reading and that beautiful reading, and for visiting us through that storm. That was an incredible bit of thunder. I just wanted to ask, we heard from the unnamed narrator in that excerpt, and of course, his strained relationship with his father. A lot of the space in between is really looking at the family you choose and building a constructed family of friends. And a lot of that family is mentioned in just fleeting but really compelling detail. Can you speak about the importance of telling this story of building this family, particularly in a country like Nigeria, where queer relationships are still criminalized?
Thank you. That's a really good question. I think it was important for me to write and publish this story set in Nigeria because I believe that the world we live in was first made, right? And so I think a big part of imagining other ways to be starts with the imagination, starts with what we write, starts with story. And I think I wrote the story at a point where I was just really both tired and heartbroken by the constant threat I kept hearing, targeted at queer people, when it comes to family, because there's this threat that, if you come out or if you are your full self, you will lose family, right? But the thing about family is that it can also be made. And I know that from my life as well. So I think for me, it was just important to move beyond the violence that we're used to seeing and the violence that we keep seeing being repeated in stories. It was important for me to move beyond that and into tenderness, into possibility, and into the kinds of relationships that no one can take from us. And yeah, I have a very strong, immovable faith in community and chosen family because that is what has saved my life. And I wanted to present that possibility for other, Nigerians who are looking for spaces to breathe, really. So yeah, that's
Well, thank you.
that's where I was coming
It's a beautiful story, and I hope everyone checks out the whole thing. So thank you for reading and for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Emily.
We're featuring the work of 12 poets in the fall issue, including Rohan Chetri, Yusuf Kaminyaka, Elizabeth Metzger, and Margaret Atwood. There's an erasure poem by Nicole Seeley. She drew from, or I suppose withdrew from, the Ferguson Report. And Win Cooper's poem, Message in a Bottle, speaks to, at least to this reader, the current state of affairs. He writes, I spin the globe to see where it stops. It rolls off the desk and hits the floor, which closes so hard it opens again. I feel like that feels a bit like 2020. Anyway, I'm delighted that one of those contributing poets is here with us tonight. Emma Hine is the author of Stay Safe, which received the Catherine A. Morton Prize and is forthcoming from Sarabande in January. Her poems and essays have recently appeared in the Baffler, Colorado Review, Guernica, and the Southern Review. Emma, congratulations on your forthcoming book and welcome.
Thank you, Emily. I can't say what an honor it is to be here, and thank you, Elgosa. That was absolutely beautiful, and it's a real privilege to read after you. I will be reading two poems, both of which appear in the fall issue of the Paris Review and also in my forthcoming book. The first of these two poems is called Young Relics. Young relics. They broke into houses, my sisters, the empty ones, just built, where nobody had yet tried to sleep. Little mounds of sawdust still in the corners, no floorboards loose. I imagine them being the way I've seen them be with horses, hands gentle on the walls. After all, a house must learn to hold a family with all its quivering systems of energy and grief. I once saw Sierra with a colt that wasn't ready to be ridden. She stood in the stall and talked until his heart rate slowed. All through our neighborhood, new houses were dark and panicking. Enter sisters, bringing comfort where it wasn't supposed to be. No key for entry, no light allowed, just a ritual gift for the rooms alone to remember. Hands on their painted flanks, voices in the eaves. And the second poem I'll be reading is called Cassandra, and thank you again. Cassandra. It's time to leave again. She unplugs the fridge and watches until the orange coils on its back have faded down to gray. She turns off the gas. She papers the windows in layers from the outside, because if she doesn't, the moon will reflect in the panes like a lamp in every room. And then the house will still seem lived in. And then how to move on? The last thing she does, always, is go with them one by one into their rooms and hold them up to pluck the glow-in-the-dark stars from the ceiling. They place the stars inside a wooden box, which is what they are, her children, little hinged boxes full of a chemical that makes light out of nothing, that glows all on its own. They're wearing coats over their patterned pajamas. When the stars are away, the house is completely dark, and somehow the sounds are louder. The final shut of the door, the porch steps, the frogs like small rocks clacking in the trees' throats. In the yard's farthest corner, she asks her children what they can see. As always, they say, nothing. The house could be invisible. It could have shrunk to the size of a blackberry. The hill could have grown up to swallow it. It might have changed into a tree. She's relieved. She can still see it so clearly, like the retinal burn of a light bulb long after it's been turned off. Like all their other houses, the already and the not yet, ranged like old flares across the hills. She starts walking, and her children follow. They're mimicking a screech owl, then listening, because if they call in the right voice, something might call back. Before long, they'll be climbing the hill to the new house, opening the unlocked door, claiming bedrooms, then waiting for her to reattach the constellations, asking, is this a cat, a cave, a sleeping bear, a little spoon? And they won't know, and she won't be able to correct them. And soon she'll unwrite the stars again, and they'll go on.
Thank you, Emma. That was beautiful. Emma, I'm wondering, both of these poems speak about home, one yet to be inhabited, another that's being left behind. When I read your submission, I thought these two made a compelling pair. But, since our homebound year started back in March, thinking about the emotional resonance and register of domestic spaces just feels, well, more meaningful. I guess I know this is sort of a big and abstract question, but what does domestic architecture mean to you? And has your sense of those places and the possibility of them changed since the pandemic?
Oh, very much so. And I love that question. Thank you. Um, so recently, I've actually started to think about and realize that my relationship with domestic spaces and objects is very sort of talismanic. All of my memories are deeply tied up in where they took place or what I was holding. And I actually have a lot of trouble separating the feeling of a memory from its location. And I think this is actually partly because I grew up in one house. My parents haven't moved since before I was born. So we've got this single space that holds all of our family memories. And these can kind of overlap and jostle each other in a haunted house sort of way, if you will. And there's a line in the first of the two poems I read, Young Relics, that I think is at the heart of my obsession with houses, how a house must hold a family's energy and grief. And I look at the house I grew up in and I see these former iterations of myself and my family, as well as our future iterations. And I think that is also what's really coming to play in the other poem I read, Cassandra. But like you say, so during the pandemic, right, our emotional relationships to domestic spaces have taken on more weight because our physical homes are also where we're going to therapy and to the gym and to events like this. So we're bringing a lot of this emotion into our apartments that would usually be spread elsewhere. And so we're asking these spaces to hold and represent a lot. And I was talking recently to a friend of mine who's a carpenter, and apparently he's been getting calls from a lot of people who want to remodel because they're realizing that the houses they've spent so much time in actually don't function as the main stage for like all these different aspects of their lives, and they feel like they need a change. So I guess to answer your question, I understand where that impulse is coming from. I'm personally pouring a lot of parts of myself into my own living spaces, and this feels really potent, but it also is kind of diluting or overpowering these talismanic memories. So I'm curious, I guess, how I'm going to remember this time and how we as a world are going to relate to domestic spaces in the future.
Wow, yeah, that's really fascinating to think about. I imagine they might counterbalance each other eventually, but right now it's all happening in the apartment.
All of it right here.
I was just thinking about how much emotion I usually leave on the F train, and it doesn't happen anymore. Anyway, well, thank you for the poems and for that conversation.
Thank you, Emily.
Before we hear from Robbie and Lydia, I wanted to mention just a few other facets of the fall issue. It's a tall stack of stories this time, including an unpublished work by Shirley Hazard. We had the good fortune to work with her biographer, Brigitte Alubis, to contextualize the piece, which was unfinished and unpublished in her papers. I think we have a shot of one of her notebooks up at Columbia's archives. Brigitte will also have a piece on the Daily soon about Hazard's politics. I encourage you to explore both features. And of course, there are the interviews. We went to Europe this quarter. None of us in America can travel overseas, after all, to feature two leading literary voices from the continent. Enrique Villamatas's conversation was an exercise in transformation, which felt apt for his own polymorphous literary style. To quote interviewer Adam Thirlwell, we conducted this interview in a mixture of French and Spanish, while his agent offered interpretive aid and sometimes joined into the conversation. This polyglot mixture was then transcribed, edited, retranslated into Spanish, and rewritten by Enrique before being definitively translated into English. And then we edited it again a few times. I love reading about his cinephile tendencies and his years in Paris. The issue's other interview is with Roman poet Antonella Anetta. Her conversation with Susan Stewart illuminates Antonella's compelling dual identity. They discuss her relationship to technology, aesthetics, and politics, all of which situate Antonella very much in the Italian capital. But they also discuss musical folkways, the oral traditions of her native Sardinia, and patterns of the weather that very much root her in a more rural lyric tradition. I hope you enjoy both interviews. And of course, there's art. We featured Troy Michi's Landscape Unknown from 2019 on the cover of the issue, but there are several more new and recent collage works inside. I love how Troy uses geometric abstraction and color in his collages, like this one, Oriente, from 2020. In some collages, he's doing more with texture and pattern, like America is Woven of Many Strands from 2019. I know it's tiny on the screen, but this collage has cut paper, photography, thread, paper mache, a garment bag, zipper, cut clothing, tape, cloth, graphite ink, grease pencil, acrylic, woven paper, all on stretched linen. Those tiny gridded sections are actually cut and woven paper, and looking at them, I feel like it makes Agnes Martin look like a loose hand. They're really incredible works. And across Troy's work, he's observing and commenting on the figure and the queer body. Many of the figures are from found photographs of vintage adult magazines, but he resituates the figure, drawing clothes onto the body and recasting the subject into new contexts. I really admire how in some recent works, like Untitled, Standing Blue from 2020, that exploration of portraiture is front and center, as is his stitch work. I'll mention that Troy will be taking over our Instagram next week on Tuesday, September 29. So please do check it out if you're on Instagram. Okay, now back to the readings. Rabi Alameddine has written 5 novels and a book of short stories. His writing has been called ambitious and exhilarating, a claim to which I heartily agree. His 6th novel, The Wrong End of the Telescope, will be published by Grove next spring. He divides his time between his bedroom and his living room. That sounds very familiar, Rabi. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Okay. So I'll read a small segment from the story. It's from the middle, and the story is basically about a family in Beirut in 2006. The first refugee was my sister, Nadia. After the Israelis bombed the airport, she and my 1-year-old nephew, cheeks still swollen with sleep, arrived with 3 suitcases in tow. One contained her clothes and belongings, the second her son's clothes, and the third was bursting with disposable diapers. She lived only 3 buildings away, nowhere near the airport, but we knew it wouldn't take her long to come over. We didn't have to ask where her husband was. He can stay where he is, she huffed. The Israelis have sophisticated weapons. I don't have to be there when one of their missiles finds him. My sister had married a Shiite. You shouldn't be saying that, my father said. Your husband is a good man, a wonderful man. We all loved my brother-in-law, but Nadia found him annoying. She had been completely obsessed with him before the wedding, but not after. I found the situation, her constant irritation with her husband, somewhat confounding. He was decent, intelligent, and admirably gentle. Not the most interesting man, one had to admit, but consistent, if anything. How a wedding could change her opinion so abruptly wasn't easy to explain. I assumed the intimacy and mundaneness of marriage had surprised her, and she had yet to recover. It could have been worse since he traveled quite a bit, being a commercial pilot. Still, she complained that he wasn't gone enough. My mother defended her by reminding everyone that she was a young bride and would grow up in time. My sister rolled her suitcase into the old room, which she hadn't allowed anyone to claim when she moved out, understandably, since she still spent most of her days in our apartment. I followed her, carrying my nephew, and put him on his cot, under his ever-circling wooden airplanes. I moved my sister's old stuffed toys around to create space for him. The walls were baby pink, the color of her nail polish and lipstick. She avoided dark shades, claiming they emphasized the puffy aspects of her lips. Watch him, Nadia said. I have to go hoarding. Your brother should go with you, my mother said. He can carry. I'll stay here, but don't forget anything. The entire country was on the road. It happened every time the Israelis bombed Beirut. Never when they shelled the south, which they did on a more regular basis. Bombing the airport during high season, though, meant that every tourist was driving out of the city and out of the country. My father raged against the traffic, and when we passed the gas station, he banged his head on the steering wheel. After dropping us off at the supermarket, he'd have to wait in line for at least a couple of hours to fill up the tank. Weshdi, who had taken my mother's car, was probably stuck at a station already. I hate this, my father yelled. Are you sure we need to do this? I asked. The Israelis won't stop, they never do. It's the right of the privileged. They're always the victims, which means they're going to rain the demons of hell upon us. He took deep breaths, trying to fill his lungs with calm. It rarely worked. Bomb everything, kill hundreds, thousands. Does anyone care, take any responsibility? Feel guilty? They blame everyone but themselves. My father's heart found some relief in diatribes. He raged every time the Israelis attacked us, less at the actual casualties and damage than at their lack of concern. This time, my father was going to rage for quite a while. My sister and I split up in the supermarket. I reveled in the excitement of upheaval, stacking my shopping cart with cases of drinking water, cartons of cigarettes for my father, sacks of flour, bulgur, and coffee. She would get everything else if we were lucky, since the market was emptying quickly. People had begun hoarding the evening before. The Lebanese had a lot of experience. I was deciding how much rice to buy when I heard my sister shriek 2 aisles away. I rushed over, pushing my cart, finding her in the baby aisle. She held a package of Pampers as a tall, better manicured woman in a tailored gray day dress tried to snatch it away. The woman blabbered and kept jerking her recently coiffed head as 2 packages of Huggies in my sister's car, as if she had a neurotic twitch. My sister's fingers had punctured the plastic. Several strands of her hair had escaped their barrette. Customers whispered, not bothering to hide their sniggering. The woman's Filipina maid in a baby blue uniform watched the melee with her hand over her mouth. The maid and her mistress must have shared a hairdresser, because they had the exact same coif, the latter in a much lighter tone, of course. They both had sweaters tied around their shoulders. Nadia tugged and pulled and screeched. The woman finally released her grip. You have 3 packages, she said, shocked at not getting what she wanted. Give me one of them. My sister snorted as she put the last package of Pampers in her cart. She turned her back and pushed her cart away. Let's go, she said when she saw me. The woman whispered to her maid, who nodded, then rushed my sister's cart, grabbed a diaper package, and disappeared down another aisle, the blue sweater floating on air like a hero's cape. My sister screamed, tried to spring her cart around to follow the maid's cooling trail, but other customers got in the way. The woman laughed, beamed. I expected her to shout, "Who's the fairest of them all?" Thank you.
Thank you, Robbie. It was great to hear that. I was glad you read the supermarket scene.
Or the Superman scene.
Yeah, supermarket Superman. I should have mentioned leading into reading the story is called The July War. It was, about the conflict in 2006. While we were editing, you mentioned to me that you wrote a draft of this story 12 years ago and only returned to it this spring when you saw everyone hoarding toilet paper. What was it like to revisit the story and think about Beirut in literature again after all of these years? Not that you haven't been thinking about it in the meantime, but to return to this story, and how did it sort of resolve or come together at that point?
Well, I mean, I wrote the story. I didn't. I kind of liked it and then didn't like it, and thought many things about it. But I put it away. I always thought that it had something in it. I just wasn't sure what yet. But then the hoarding, the toilet paper hoarding got me interested, and I remembered the story and I brought it out. And then I realized that what it had and what I hadn't concentrated on is how people behave during crisis. Not just during crisis, as to how people react and behave when encountering sudden loss. How do we grieve? So that story took on a new significance to me, and that's what I worked with. Is how does, when people were hoarding toilet paper over here, it didn't make any sense. Like, of all things, do you really think you're going to miss toilet paper for and I remember exactly during the 206, my sister, her boy, and my sister is a completely rational person. She's a philosophy professor, for crying out loud. But she was hoarding Huggies and Pampers, just in case. And she couldn't figure out why. And again, the whole idea for me is what does it mean to lose, and what do you compensate with great loss? How do you adjust? And in the story, the different people in the family adjust in different ways. So that became a completely different story than what I had in mind in the beginning.
I see. And of course, I mean, I also really admired it's such a portrait of Beirut and the family's affection for the town. Recollections of Beirut in crisis felt particularly unfortunately resonant this summer after the explosion on the waterfront. I wonder, has this story evolved again, or do you look at it differently after the summer?
I don't know. I don't know if it's evolved again, because again, I've been writing about Beirut and troubles in Beirut for a long time, and what has changed, what has dramatically changed with the explosion this summer, is my feeling that enough is enough. And I wrote an op-ed about it. There's been a couple of the reaction on the ground in Beirut has been a lot more determined that enough, we've had enough. And that I'm not sure I've handled in this story, and I'm not sure, but it's the continuous, the one disaster after another, after another, after another, and all that could have been prevented. I at one point thought, this is where this administration is taking us, one disaster after another, and then you start forgetting because there's one disaster after another, and Beirut has been going through this for a long, long time. So what has changed is the determination that we've had enough, we've suffered enough. I don't know what that will change. I don't know how Beirut will change. I don't know how my work will change. But that has been the major transformation.
Okay, well, that's a hopeful transformation, right? I think
I hope so.
Well, thank you for sharing the story and for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, this evening, I'm pleased to welcome Lydia Davis. Lydia's most recent collection of stories is Can't and Won't. Her translation of Proust's Letters to His Neighbor appeared in 2017, and her Essays One, her first collection of nonfiction, came out with the FSG last year. She's currently working on a second volume of essays and completing a translation of stories by the Dutch writer A.L. Schneiders. I was looking through Lydia's work on our author index, and it has a list of contributions as long as my arm. We started publishing her fiction in 1983, and in 2016, she won the Hadada, our Lifetime Achievement Award. Needless to say, it's great to have her back in our pages and to have her join us here tonight. Lydia, thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing some of the 6 stories from the magazine. Oh, I think you need to unmute.
Well, there I
There you
am.
go. Thank you.
Can't figure it out, but I'll learn. So I'm very pleased to be here and with all of you and my fellow readers. My stories are going to be a bit of a change of pace from, I don't know if I'm visible. I can't see myself. Am I visible?
You are. You look great.
Okay, I see only a name that isn't mine on the screen. So anyway, my stories will be a change of pace from Robbie's. We're in a lighter mode here, and they still involve conflict, but on a much more minor scale than the sort of conflict he was talking about. The first one is called An Incident on the Train. I'm on the train traveling alone with 2 seats to myself. I have to use the restroom. Without thinking about it carefully, I ask a couple across the aisle if they would please watch my things for me for a moment. Then I take a closer look at them and have second thoughts. They are young, for one thing. Also, they seem very nervous. The guy's eyes are bloodshot, and the girl has a lot of tattoos. Still, it's done now. I get up and start moving back. But as a precaution, I ask a man sitting a few seats back from mine, who is dressed in a suit and looks like a businessman, to please keep an eye on that young couple for me, because I've had to leave my seat for a moment and all my things are on it. I could just go back and retrieve my bag, giving an excuse. In fact, this is suggested by the man who objects to being put in this position, the position of having to stop what he is doing and watch a young couple who have done nothing wrong, so far anyway. But I feel it is too awkward to go and get my bag, and even if I went and got my bag, I would still be leaving on my seat a valuable coat. Can't you wait, asks the man, as though it's none of his business. No. Then I have another idea. Maybe you could go sit in my seat while I'm gone. No, says the man. Then I'd have to leave my things. He's not being very cooperative. But that lady across the aisle could watch them for you. She looks trustworthy. The lady is old and she's sitting very still. She's asleep. You could wake her up. I wouldn't want to do that. The old lady is sitting next to a younger woman. The younger woman is also slumped over, asleep, and the old woman is leaning against her. Just nudge her a little. No, I won't. In fact, I don't think she's asleep. She may be dead. I think he's joking, though I'm not sure. Our voices have been rising. Now the people around us are disturbed by our conversation and by me standing over him in the aisle, all except for the old lady, who really might be dead. Her mouth is open, but I can't see her eyes. Can you keep it down, someone says. It's the woman on the far side of the old lady. She has woken up and is glaring at us. My mom is sleeping. I don't like her tone. Now I get a little aggressive. I thought she was dead, I say. The woman elbows the old lady. Mom, tell this goofball you're not dead. The old lady opens her eyes and looks blankly at her daughter. I'm not your daughter, she says. Oh, brother, says the daughter. Meanwhile, someone behind them is beginning to hum. It's a teenage girl, or maybe she's a little younger, maybe 12. The humming is getting to me, given all the commotion that's already going on. I'm sensitive to noise. Why is she humming? I ask the woman next to her, who seems to be her mother. It's you, you're making her nervous. She hums when she's nervous or people talk too much, when anyone talks too much, her mother says. She stares at us, though, peacefully, while the girl continues humming. Now I'm interested. Some other people have turned around to look at the girl's mother. The old lady tries to turn her head, but she can't turn it very far. The girl's mother continues to explain about her daughter. The girl is humming louder. The old lady is becoming more agitated. She looks at each person around her and then glares at the woman next to her. I don't know you from Adam. I still have to go to the bathroom, though I had forgotten for a while. Now the businessman, having lost patience, gets up. All right, I'll go sit in your seat. Just be quick about it. Let's get this brouhaha over with. I think that's a strange choice of words, especially for a businessman, but I don't say so. He pushes past me and goes to my seat. I want to make sure he sits in the right one, the one on the aisle, so that he can guard the other one too by the window, which looks out at the river. He bends over, moves my coat, and sits down in the aisle seat. Now, through the noise of the old lady and the girl behind her, who is still humming, though her mother has stopped talking, I hear the young man with the bloodshot eyes speak loudly. Hey man, there's someone sitting there. The businessman says he knows and that she asked him to hold her seat. The young man is surprised. Why would she do that, he asks. The businessman is silent, probably thinking what he should say. The young man waits, then he speaks again. Really? She asked me to sit here while she was in the restroom, says the businessman. Why, man, that doesn't make sense, says the young man. He seems a little defensive. The businessman is still silent. Finally, he just shrugs. Oh, for Christ's sake, says the young man. For Christ's sake, God damn. But he says it quietly. He is still saying it when I walk away down the aisle. And I'm feeling a little bad about making such a fuss, since after all, now he is trying to defend my seat. So maybe I was wrong about him in the first place, him and his tattooed girlfriend. I didn't trust them just because they were young. On the other hand, his language was pretty bad. And the other story is called The Left Hand. The left hand prides itself on being more refined than the right hand. Yes, it is in fact a little slimmer, the knuckles are not as knobbly, and the skin is even a little smoother. But, says the right hand calmly, think of all the work I've done that you haven't over the years. Well, says the left, I've been there alongside you all the way, helping. But think of all the things you can't do that I can, says the right. Think of all the skills I've developed. The left hand hasn't worked as hard as the right. It is usually the assistant. It braces and steadies the carrot while the right hand cuts. It braces and steadies the notebook while the right hand writes. It braces and steadies the whole body in a crouching position while the right hand scrubs the floor or digs in the flower bed. True, there are some things they do together in a balanced way. For instance, they play the piano together, but here they are not equal. The left hand is quite effective at repeating a chord over and over, even a broken chord, but not very nimble in the 16th note passages, not nearly as nimble as the right. The right hand points that out. Now the left hand is hurt. Its fourth finger has always been especially weak and can't move very independently. The left hand has always been frustrated and ashamed of how clumsily it plays. Though in fact, the left hand is aware that by the highest standards, the right hand's 16th notes are not all that even or fast. The right hand apologizes. It says, yes, sometimes you catch a thing that I've dropped. And you do turn off the water when I leave it on by mistake. Don't forget, says the left hand, still hurt, that you may be more skilled than I am with a knife. But the other day you sliced some skin off the top of my thumb. And remember that once you cut through my little finger so deep that I've permanently lost some feeling in it. That was years ago, says the right hand. Still, says the left, I'm the one you injure when you stop paying attention. I don't think you really care. Both hands wear rings. The left hand is proud that it wears a ring all the time and that the ring is gold. But the right hand is proud that it wears a ring on special occasions and that the ring was purchased in Europe. Some things they do together with equal skill, such as washing each other in the basin. Though it is true that the right hand is the one who reaches across for the soap, while the left hand draws back out of the way. And, says the right hand, when we're rinsing, I make sure there's no soap under your ring. True, says the left hand, but on the evenings when you've worn your ring, I remove it while we're washing. I rinse it. I hold it while you dry it, and I put it away in the wooden box. But, says the right hand, I open the box. True, says the left hand. It is tired of arguing. It says to itself, don't we work together? Don't we learn from each other? The right hand could keep going with the argument. It is full of ideas and energy for more. But the left hand is silent. So that is the end of it. For now, anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. If all debates could be so civil. I was wondering, changing direction slightly from those stories, I was looking back at your Paris Review interview the other day, and in it you talk about inspirations for your novel, The End of the Story. You mentioned Thomas Bernard's long monologue rants, Elizabeth Hardwick, Marguerite Duras' The Lover, and you say that when you're trying to do something you're not used to doing, in that case, writing your first novel, you look consciously for a model for what you think you want to do. So I guess my question, and I'm sure many viewers would also love to know, what are you looking at now? Are you studying any particular new forms or specific authors these days?
Well, actually, I'm spending most of my time preparing the next two books, which is, getting the second book of essays ready and doing a few more translations of the Dutch writer Snyder's stories for that collection. So the one thing I can think of on the horizon, and I may not be able to do it, it's very difficult. I want to write a story about, I want to write the life story of one of the cats that our family had a few years back. And I got a terrific start on it years ago. But I think it's a very tricky, it's told by him.
Okay.
And I get around the fact that he can tell a good story in English. I think I cleverly got around that. But how to avoid being cute, or how to avoid being coy or sweet or sentimental. So there I began to, I haven't yet looked at models, but I thought about, how many life stories of animals told by the animals do I know? Not too many. I thought of Black Beauty right away, but I haven't gone and looked at it. And the other animal stories I think of, no, I'm forgetting, Mitzi.
Yeah.
Sigrid Nunez, right?
Yeah, that was a great book.
But was it told from the first person? That's what
I don't think it was. And just hearing you talk, I was thinking about Brad Watson's Last Days of the Dogman, which is brutal, but also not first person at all.
Yeah. So I don't know that one. So I may be looking for models for this, or I may just give up. I go back to it and I like certain moments of it, and then I like the idea. but I don't know if I can pull it off. So that's one thing.
Okay, well, I think many of us hope that you do pull it off. So thank you for sharing some work in progress. We're just about out of time. I am amazed that our pacing that out worked as well as it did. So I'd like to again thank Elegosa, Emma, Ravi, and Lydia. Thank you all for your work and for sharing it with us here tonight. I love reading these pieces in the first place, but how exceptional it is to hear them read by their makers. Thank you. To everyone out there, thank you for making the time to celebrate literature with us. Before you go, please do scroll through the chats over on the right. There is more information on these fabulous writers and also info on how you can subscribe and support the review. Otherwise, thank you again. Please stay safe, read well, vote, and have a good night.